Some of you may have seen that the annual State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World report was published on Wednesday. And it revealed that 733 million people faced hunger in 2023. That's equivalent to 1 in 11 people globally and 1 in 5 in Africa. The report shows that, quote, the world has been set back 15 years, with levels of undernourishment comparable to those in 2008. The report projects that if current trends continue, almost 600 million people will be chronically undernourished by 2030, with 53% living in Africa. What a painful thing to know that there is not enough to feed everyone. Except, is that really true?
No.
That's right. The United Nations World Food Program explains that there is no global food shortage. Quote, we produce more than enough food to feed everyone in the world. We produce so much food globally, yet 1/3 of it, 1.3 billion tons, is wasted. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, all that wasted food is enough to feed 1.26 billion people, which is almost twice the number of undernourished people across the globe. So, why do people around the world and right here in this country and in this city go without? Well, we know it's not because of lack of food. It's because of lack of access to food, because of war and conflict, because of environmental changes resulting from climate change, global economic systems that do not prioritize the well-being of all people, far from it, to name a few. But not because of a general shortage of available nutrition. Olivier de Schutter, UN Special Reporter on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, says, quote, the global industrial food system is disastrously vulnerable to increasing climate, conflict, and economic shocks. With climate change increasingly pounding farmers, building climate-resilient food systems is now a life or death matter, as is establishing social protection floors and ensuring workers are paid living wages. We desperately need a new recipe for addressing hunger, unquote. I wonder what it would take to do that, to formulate and follow that new recipe. I wonder what it would take to feed everyone. 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little, Philip says to Jesus. How can I set this before 100 people? The man from Baal Shalisha said to Elisha. What would it take to feed 100 hungry people in a war-torn land, 5,000 in an occupied territory, 733 million in a warming planet? Would it take a miracle? Maybe. But a miracle suggests to me something that is unexplainable, supernatural. But these problems seem to have explainable solutions. Feeding everyone, we actually know that it's possible. We know it's possible without divine intervention, at least the dramatic kind we might picture. So, I think what Jesus is up to this morning is not so much to show off his divine powers, not to perform a magic trick, but to reveal the truth. That there is enough for everyone. That God has already provided the miracle of the feeding a long time ago, and the miracle is creation itself. There was already enough for those gathered that day, and for all who came after that. Bread and fish and fruits and vegetables and beans and grains and milk and meat. I think that Jesus was calling those 5,000 to a new recipe. That is the mission of God. Jesus was calling them and us to protect that already existing miracle and to distribute its yield to all people. Jesus was and is calling the crowd to God's mission. It is not an easy call to answer clearly. There has not been a day since then that human beings have not gone hungry. We've built skyscrapers and travel through space regularly. We split the atom. And we hold a world of knowledge in our palms every day. But we've never been able to answer this call. It just feels too big, too hard. 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little, Philip says to Jesus. How can I set this before 100 people? The man from Baal Shalisa says to Elisha. Instead of organizing and forming new friendships and connections to preserve that feeling of 5,000 gathered in community on the grass, instead of founding food banks or taking up collections or planning for free farming and livestock education programs, instead of trusting themselves and their God-given power to engage in the mission of loving one another, those gathered on the grass that morning tried to make a king. Tried to force Jesus to sit on a throne. You do it. You are so good at it. Do it for us. And Jesus responds by running for the hills. Because as much as we still, to this day, try to place a crown on his head, Jesus will not be a king. He will not partake in the very earthly power structures that obscure that truth that there is enough for everyone. I wonder what kind of mood Jesus was in when he retreated to the mountain by himself. Did he scream to the wilderness void, "I showed them exactly what to do. Why don't they get it? Why don't they think they can do it? Why are they so afraid?" I wonder if the disciples thought the same about Jesus' mood, thought he might just be all done with us, might never return. I wonder if that's why they went ahead and got in the boat, rowing toward the other side of the sea without him. I wonder if as the stormy waves threatened to pull them to the rocky bottom, they were sure that they had been abandoned. I wonder if as Jesus appeared walking on the waves, they feared that he was there to rebuke them, to punish them. And I wonder if as his presence pulled them to immediate safety, they finally knew that our God does not abandon us. Through years and decades and millennia, as we try and succeed and fail and try and succeed and fail to get it right, God is here, pulling us back to dry land again and again, revealing the truth of the kingdom of heaven and calling us to the work of God's mission. And no hero, no king is going to do that work for us. It's ours, together. It's the big, hefty stuff of fighting climate change, demanding justice, and promoting policies and organizations that help the most vulnerable in our communities. It's pursuing peace. It's repenting of the devastation in the wake of colonialism that resulted in a single continent experiencing more hunger than the rest of the world. In the shadow of continued racism and insulationist impulses that threaten to let it go unnoticed. It's coming up with economic solutions and scientific breakthroughs that seek specifically to feed. And it's also the smaller stuff of meeting in that kitchen here at St. John's, making sandwiches, wrapping up eggs, and packing lunch bags for our neighbors. As to that staggering report released this week, we can't count on a miracle to respond. I suspect that's the kind of thinking that makes us throw up our hands in defeat. We can count on the hope that I believe comes when we remember, when we know that there is enough. This feeding of multitudes, it's not magic. It never was. It's not miraculous, I don't think. John calls what happened that day a sign, not a miracle. It's not necessarily that exciting. It will not result in fame or fortune or a throne. It will not be driven by ambition. It will be driven by mission, by the new recipe Jesus promises is there for us, just waiting to be revealed as the truth that has always been, the real miracle of creation, that there is enough for everyone.